Hi, this is Carlos Cousins, and now we're going to be solving a sentence completion problem that asks us to take into account vocabulary. So the way that you approach this sort of problem is by looking at the vocabulary that is given and try to find the best option, the one that takes in the least assumptions. So let's go ahead and try this problem out. While the two countries have very different natural resources, comma, blank between the two is blank because they face similar political barriers to development. So two things that we need to watch out for here is the first part of the sentence is while. So whatever follows the comma here, it should be inherently different from the first clause of the sentence. So the first clause here is that the two countries have very different natural resources. So whatever follows should have to do with their similarities or something that is downplaying those differences. And the next thing we should watch out for is whatever is being told to us, it must happen because they face similar political barriers to development. So it must happen because they have this in common, the obstacles that they face. So let's go ahead and look at the options that we're given. So option A here is conflict and seldom. So while the two countries have very different natural resources, okay, conflict between the two is seldom. So this satisfies the first thing. So they are different. However, their differences, their conflicts, the problems that they have with each other, which is what conflict means, are seldom. And seldom means rare. So it doesn't happen very often. So this satisfies the first thing. However, because they face similar political barriers to development, seems like a strange reason. So only because they face similar problems, we'd have to assume that only because they face similar problems, they are also acting in some sort of neutral way toward each other at the very least. So they're not in conflict and only because they face similar problems. So this is an assumption. So it could be, and let's see if it's the best answer, but we're assuming here. Okay, the second option is competition and distinguished. So let's see. While the two countries have very different natural resources, competition between the two is distinguished because they face similar political barriers to development. So this doesn't satisfy the first one because we're highlighting a difference in the first clause of the sentence, that the two countries have very different natural resources. And then we're again highlighting a difference when we're saying that the competition is distinguished. So we wouldn't have while here if we were doing two differences in a row, so this definitely isn't the answer. The next option we have is antagonism and inessential. So while the two countries have very different natural resources, antagonism between the two is inessential because they face similar political barriers to development. So this does satisfy the first one in that you start out with their differences and then you downplay their antagonism, so the conflict that they have with each other. That conflict is not essential. However, the fact that they face similar political barriers to development being a reason to why this antagonism isn't there is, again, the assumption. It's the exact same assumption we made for the first one. So now we're really putting these into doubt because they rely on the same assumption and are basically saying the same thing. So A and C seem like very shaky answers. We shouldn't very much rely on them at this point. We're not crossing them out completely. This next choice that we've got here is likeness and dubious. So while the two countries have very different natural resources, likeness between the two is dubious. Again, this doesn't satisfy the first thing that we pointed out because here we're highlighting a difference. So while the two countries have very different natural resources, and here again we'd be highlighting a difference if we said that their likeness, how they're alike, is dubious or questionable. And we wouldn't have while if we were highlighting the same thing on both sides of the comma here. So this definitely isn't the answer. And then the last option that we've got here is comparison and instructive. So while the two countries have very different natural resources, comparison between the two is instructive because they face similar political barriers to development. Whoa, that is laggy. So this one makes sense. So they have a difference in that they have different natural resources. However, despite that difference, we can learn from them. That's what instructive means, by comparing them because they face similar obstacles. So it makes a lot more sense that because they have a similar situation, we might be comparing them to learn something from them than that the conflicts between them might be played down. And especially since we have this option twice, these two are definitely not correct answers. So this is the right answer here, comparison and instructive. This was a little bit of a dense one. I hope that this helped with this problem. And when you have one that's this difficult, really zero in on what you're assuming and what you're not. Good luck with this sort of problem.